Welcome back. In 2013, a goofy comedy and this week's episode, We're the Millers, told the story of a wholesome yet fake family smuggling marijuana across the Mexican border. You know, tale as old as time. But while We're the Millers was in theaters, something very real was happening in Colorado where the events of the movie take place, and something that would actually change global drug policy forever. This is the story of We're the Millers and how Colorado went from counterculture punchline to legal weed pioneer. Starring Jennifer Aniston and Jason Sudeikis, they pose as husband and wife with their kids, Kenny and Casey, played by Will Poulter and Emma Roberts, giving him the perfect cover to smuggle a smidge of marijuana. It's basically an R and green rated version of National Lampoon. And yes, the entire comedy assumes weed is illegal. And at the time that this was being written, it was because voters had not had an opportunity to decide whether they wanted their states to have recreational marijuana legally. And in real life, by the time the movie was released, Colorado voters had already chosen to legalize recreational cannabis. Not medical, recreational. This wasn't Cheech and Chong, this was constitutional amendments. In November 2012, Colorado passed Amendment 64, becoming the first US state that said adults 21 and over can buy, possess, and use cannabis, and retail sales officially began January 1st, 2014. We're the Millers came out right during this transition. So 1 year, the punchline was, "This is dangerous and illegal." 18 months later, tourists lining up outside dispensaries like it's a new iPhone release. So, what's happened in the decades since? Let's look at some questions and answers. And as a Freakonomics fan, I am fascinated by this. Keep in mind, this is just the YouTube component of a relationships-based podcast. So we're not going to get into like all of the weeds of the subject, but I'll try to, give you a high level look at this, okay? The answer to did crime increase or decrease is nuanced, but overall, violent crime did not surge because of cannabis legalization. So here's just a couple of details. Violent crime in Colorado is pretty flat relative to overall national trends. Now, property crime is more influenced by economic variables such as weed policy. Overall, legal cannabis reduces illegal black market cannabis activity that reduces cartel involvement in local street supply. Now, there are increases in some categories, such as DUIs with THC detections, petty diversions to neighboring states, but the whole streets turned lawless narrative simply did not happen, has not happened. A decade later, Colorado is neither a utopia nor a Mad Max, and Colorado did not collapse. Over the last decade, Colorado has recorded more than 2.5 billion, with a B, in cannabis tax revenue. Okay, so where does that money go? A smidge goes to public education, another smidge goes to mental health programs, another smidge goes to the state's general fund, and another smidge goes to local city budgets. Also, cannabis legalization created anywhere from the neighborhood of 35 to 40,000 jobs when you include cultivation, retail, compliance, packaging, security, and labs. Also, in the decades since, legal cannabis became an industry. So what are some of the benefits of this? First of all, tax revenue. Again, jobs. You have lower arrests for possession of a smidge. You have less burden on courts. You have lower opioid mortality in some analysis. And yes, this is a real correlation. Again, I'm not going to get in the weeds of this, but there is some correlation there. And younger generations tend to see cannabis through a regulated product lens instead of a street economy. Questions, and in all fairness, let's look at some of the drawbacks. What are the drawbacks? Now, one of the things we have heard from people who lived in the 60s and, went to Woodstock, man, say that today's cannabis is a higher potency than what they smoked back in the day. And there's still that sticky situation of THC vapes and concentrates that present kind of some legal challenges and just make for some messy policy. And then there have been increases in ER visits involving edible overdosing. And this is mostly by inexperienced users. And there is and remains a very complicated federal banking policy. Essentially, if you run a legal dispensary in Colorado or one of the states that has since legalized it, you can't just take your chunk of sales and deposit them into a bank. Now, many states, including Colorado, Washington, and California, have developed their own, credit unions for people in the cannabis business. And I think we could all see this nuisance tourism in many towns where people come in just to procure legal marijuana, regardless of its legal status in neighboring states. And legal status in neighboring states is literally all over the map. In 2013, We're the Millers made weed a naughty taboo line. In 2025, more than half of US states have adult use legal markets. And in many cases, people can walk into a dispensary like it's a Walgreens. The Colorado experiment basically became the blueprint, and now the joke is the opposite. So yes, We're the Millers is a fun road trip comedy, but Colorado's legalization era is the real blockbuster because it showed the world that cannabis policy could move back from alley to bail box to tax revenue line item. And it wasn't a joke. It was the start of $1 trillion global market. So go ahead and give the subscribe button a smidge of love so you never miss a thing. And just remember, new episodes of the Real Relationships podcast premiere every Thursday on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on all of the socials. We're on, of course, YouTube. New episodes drop every Thursday as well, along with Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, and Instagram. We appreciate our listeners, followers, and subscribers, and we enjoy bringing you new content pretty much every day on our social media platforms. Stay legal, stay safe, and we will see you soon.